welcome to the Self-Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Sitt, and today we have a really wonderful guest. Her name is Eva Wieprecht, and she's joining the podcast to talk about her experiences with Virginia Satir's work and also to share about her personal hero's journey. Eva is the director of the International Virginia Satir Institute of Germany, and we connected through a Satir Global Community Zoom call, and also through the help of my co-host, Sharon Loeschen. Eva started off her career actually not anywhere near the therapy or the change world. She started in the business world, working on her MBA and connected to her family business. But her authentic self and a lot of different parts of her personality, it seems her desire to learn, to be creative, brought her to other spaces and adventures. So now her work focuses on using Virginia Satir's work and a variety of other models for coaching for individuals, businesses, and she offers us a variety of trainings and workshops around the world. In our conversation and in a private conversation I had with her before this interview, I found Eva to be a very creative, passionate, brave, and loving person. She has a bright smile that brightens up every room, even though it's through Skype. I'm finding that as I'm connecting to more people and having a chance to learn together and from them, this chance to share ideas and to grow is reflective of a lot of what I've appreciated about Virginia Satir. Something in Eva really resonated with me when we first met in the Zoom call. She's very genuine, and her passion for working with people really shines through, and hopefully shines through in this interview. She has a lot of curiosity and positivity and a lot of interest in things that push her edge of learning and growth. More to Eva's background, her journey is pretty wide-ranging and rich, and it includes becoming a master trainer in a model called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. And her training in that model led her to studying hypnosystemic approaches, which integrates Milton Erickson's work and Virginia Satir's work. She also studied closely with Stephen Gilligan, and she works with him as well, who was one of the primary students of Milton Erickson, who is the father of hypnotherapy. And this approach is called generative trance and coaching. She's also trained as a dancer and a ballet dancer in her earlier life, and she uses dance and movement as a way of facilitating the therapy or the change process. So without further ado, why don't we begin with the interview? We start talking and we're engaged in a conversation where Eva's sharing about her connection to Virginia Satir, what the attraction was, what light sort of lit up in her and how that process began. So let's begin and carry on with the conversation between myself and Eva. So you were introduced to NLP. You learned that Milton Erickson and Virginia Satir were the ones that the creators of NLP, they were studying those two. Yeah. And then you were doing this Ericksonian and Fritz Perls, and you were studying, and you were doing this Ericksonian exercise, and then just spontaneously, you unconsciously decided, hey, let me embody Virginia Satir. Is that right? Is that how? And then your study.
No, that was I pretty thought. No, I really wanted to dig into the family systems work. I knew that from the get-go. First day studying NLP, I knew, Virginia Satir was one of the bases. This is where I want to go. I just heard the name and it lit a fire in me, and I just knew this is where I want to move towards. I just need to find the right track to really get to the people that have not just tools, understanding, but also the spirit.
Right. Really so I'd like to understand the fire, because I think it's a really unique thing when somebody, because I had this similar kind of experience just reading some small foreword that she wrote in a book, and it lit something inside of me that I thought, oh my God, there's something here that I need to look into. So I want to understand that aha moment for you. What was exactly going on, and what was it about something that you connected to with her that resonated?
Oh, one of my beloved teacher, Judith Delozer, who's also an NLP developer, she talked about a personal encounter she had with Virginia Satir because as she was working, she was writing a book with Richard Bandler and John Grinder. And at the time they're working the book together, she was living on the property where Judith Delozer was also living. And she said, I just met this. Judy is a pretty small woman. She's very petite. And she said, I had this encounter with Virginia, and she was just this love. I mean, everything was connection and love. And she was like Mother Earth. And she gave me a big hug. And she's very big. She's very tall. And so I kind of landed right into her breasts. And I felt like, oh my God, I'm back to Mama. And so I had heard this very humorous story. And knowing that there's this Mother Earth and that there's this brilliant, highly intelligent person that figured out the really universal patterning about what's happening in family systems. And I realized there were so many universal things happening in my family that we didn't figure out. But I felt, oh, if we had some support, like a Virginia support, maybe, there would have been other potential. So I think my love for my family and my love for, making things good and right, what your intention is, and the feeling for the pain that happens in families, really kind of resonated with me hearing the story about Virginia. And that was more a personal story, right?
Right.
And then I heard the first sentences I heard from her were the 5 freedoms, and they were just words that deeply touched me.
Right.
And then
Right.
I realized, oh, the other thing, the third thing I heard that she was saying at the age of 5, she wanted to become a detective on families.
Yes. Yes.
And that's actually a term I have used myself. I always called myself a detective in my own family, like the one who's kind of sniffing and figuring out the things that were not talked about or, kind of hidden. And that actually really was the place where I'm like, oh my God, she's really speaking right into my
Right.
soul.
So maybe we can rewind back because when you first started talking about the context of the family business and how you and your father had different views of things, what do you
Sure.
think was as a family detective, is that similarity you had with Virginia Satir? What was the specific puzzle or problem that life was challenging you to answer that then Virginia Satir was a clue for you? So maybe can you phrase it as like maybe a question or a problem that life was posing to you?
Yeah, I was digging in and trying to figure out what's the problem with me. As I was trying to figure out things in our company, I was over searching, how am I the problem? What's the problem in me?
Right.
And as I connected with the field work, I really changed perspective to, it's not me that's the problem. It's not my dad who is the problem. It's not the company that's the problem. It's the interactional space
Mm,
of many players that are there and absent. At some point I realized my grandfather, who was the founder twice of the company, who was dead, who I actually never met. And he died 2 years before I was born. But sometimes the absent people are part of the whole,
sure. Yeah.
systemic weaving of influences. And that perspective really shifted something for me from self-blame, self-hate, putting myself really down.
What were you blaming yourself for, Eva?
I was
Were,
blaming myself for not getting it right. I was blaming myself for not being good enough. I was blaming myself for not understanding it clear, for not maybe being clever enough. There was a lot of,
clever
you know,
enough to what? To make the business successful? To what was the
to
goal?
understand what the person that I love the most is really wanting from me. It
Okay.
felt like we're talking different languages. It really
So
felt
you
like,
between you and your father, you were missing each other
I think
and
we were totally missing each other. We really
okay.
wanted to make it work, and we are like totally missing it. Like I presented things, and I didn't get validated for that, and I
Okay.
tried so much. because I was very people oriented and my dad is very task oriented. So we're basically speaking very different languages.
Mm-hmm.
And
So when it wasn't working, the first thing that happened is you blamed yourself.
I did
Okay.
totally blame myself. I totally said, I'm not doing it right. I may not have the right preparation. I may be in the wrong field. Not having, studied enough. I need to, maybe work on myself a little bit more. I mean, there was a lot about not enough, or maybe
Okay.
too much. I think there was also a lot about I may be too much for him or for us.
Okay.
So yeah, the too much and not
Too
enough.
much. Yeah. What do you mean by too much? You may be too much for him.
Too much opinion, too much self opinion, too much, oh,
Okay.
we could go this way, and I would like to invite these people so we get a fuller picture. I guess I felt I was bringing too many different ideas in that weren't part of a conversation before, not part of a, every company has rituals, every company has a certain language, every company has a certain way of doing things, and I I open to different types of conversations, different types of rituals, different types of ideas, and
Yeah.
I felt maybe that is a little bit too much.
Well, what you're describing with the company is, and Virginia talked about systems as systems. So whether it's a family or whether it's a business, there are the implicit rules, the family rules, or the cultural rules that dictate what you can or can't do.
Yeah,
And it sounds like what you were sort of boxed in by a certain, you were feeling the walls, but you didn't
yeah.
know what they were called or how to cope with them. Um, could you talk about what it did for you to learn about Virginia's work? You mentioned the five freedoms. What happened to your energy or to your sense of well-being as you started to learn about Virginia's work in the face of this conflict with the family business and trying to fit in?
hmm Well, I mean, it was almost like I guess I was kind of in two worlds. I was in the company world. My self-esteem level went actually down a lot, and
Hmm.
I would say progressively to a lower level. And so I did not. My sense of self-worth was very diminished at some point. And but learning about Satir's work and learning about that work, I felt like, oh, here are new ideas. I understand this. This is making sense to me. Here's something that I would like to introduce. I would like to bring also to our system. But I was also hitting challenges of not right now, not here, and this is not a good moment or something like that.
Okay. Okay.
It was almost like I had to put, I had to split into worlds. Here's this, and this speaks my language, but here is where I'm trying to fit in, and I can't bridge it.
Right. So when you tried to bring it into the family business, it was being rejected or there was a resistance to it.
Yeah, I think there was a certain threat. I think the system felt threatened by
Okay.
it. And what I realized too is that what happened was a certain split. Some people oriented towards me, and they were getting some messages of how we could talk about certain things and how we could figure out certain things. I had kind of like an open door policy. So if people things were not right, I would have an open ear and say, okay, let's really sit down and figure this out. I really want to get to the source of things, and I want to get the details that are involved in all of this. Some of the processes were long, and then there was a lot of feedback that was not necessarily wanted for others. So now we have a conflict. Do I
Mhm.
tilt towards this person or this person? And I realize I am, through my presence, creating a conflict and a disorientation, a chaos that I really don't want to create, because I really wanted something good for the company, something good for my dad and for every employee involved. So that was the least thing I wanted, and I felt
Mhm.
really devastated about it. I felt really hurt and devastated and like a big failure.
So that's when you made the decision to leave the family business?
Yeah, I was actually, in this whole process, I was also getting really sick. My energy level was getting low. I actually developed about 30 years ago in my teenage years, which is kind of the typical time when that gets triggered. I developed a chronic disease, which is called colitis.
Mm-hmm.
And the symptoms in this phase was massive. I also had in this time, I also had cancer, had cervix cancer. So I got a lot of calls from the universe saying,
Yeah.
on the physical level, what you're doing right now is not quite right. And in this process of feeling there is no way to go. To put it in Joseph Campbell words, Joseph Campbell used a really beautiful term which says, sometimes you climb the ladder all the way up to the very top to reach, your very best. And I did professionally in terms of with clients and some of our employees, I actually got a lot of respect and a lot of good feedback and, some accomplishments. So sometimes you climb all the way the ladder up to realize that you place the ladder against the wrong wall.
Right.
And I realized at this point, I think I placed my ladder against the wrong wall. I don't know what I'm here to do. And so it's kind of a epiphany, like poof, wow, what I thought I was always supposed to do. I don't think I can continue doing that.
Right. And I think within your hero's journey, I wonder if it's accurate to say that the wall that you put the ladder against initially was roles, sort of ego desires from the family that you're growing up with, and which is different from maybe your authentic self.
Absolutely. I wanted to make my family happy. I wanted to move this business successful in the third generation. I wanted to continue a dream, a vision of a grandfather I haven't even met. So I found there was a lot of myth, there was a lot of fantasy, there was a lot of story, there was a lot of hallucination around, oh my God, we have to make this work. This is really what I'm here to do. And I was really part of I think I created a fairy tale around me that I am the third son, so, in a way to continue this journey. And this is what I'm supposed to do. And in my fantasy, there was a great connection with my dad. I saw him proud and happy and, very close to me. I think what I was striving for most was, if I'm successful in the company, I will earn the love of my father in a way that I can understand his love, because I know that he loves me. There's no question around that.
Yeah.
But I felt I wanted to earn it in a way that I know how to feel it best. So I really get it.
Right. Because that through the business was a language that your dad understood. And if you could somehow find a bridge between you and him, which you were struggling so much to do, then you could have that connection and have that love.
Totally. I wanted to really, meet him in his language of success and be really successful in that. And I realized where the things where I'm good at, where I bring people to the table, where I really figure out detective stories to really get to the core of the matter and then resolve it. The things which I partially did in the company, but it wasn't really the things that the focus of attention was on. So I found myself the things that I know I can do and I've blossomed, I'm really good at, they're not interesting for the frame I was in. And the other things that were expected of me, I'm not so very good at that. I'm not so great with looking at numbers and, little, specific details. So I just realized that we're looking at different agendas for what does success mean.
Yeah.
And find my position.
Eva, I was watching on the Satir Global, when you're a member with the Satir Global, in the members pages, there's resources. And one of the resources is an interview. The last video is an interview with Virginia Satir, and she talks about peace. And in that, she really breaks down the difference between what she calls the hierarchical model or the mechanical model, as opposed to the seed model. And as you're talking about your earlier experiences, the picture that I'm having is that you were being invited into a mechanical model of how to do business, how to
Yeah.
live, which is there's dominance and submission,
Mhm.
and there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, where
Yeah.
the communication is closed, not open.
Yeah.
The person on at the highest part of the ladder is right, and you don't question that person's authority.
Yeah.
But maybe your spirit or your own core self, which resonated so much with the values and expression with someone like Virginia Satir, couldn't fit into that mold. And maybe it was her seed model, this model of growth, this model of freedom
Yeah.
that seems to. So I wonder if that separation or that distinction has any meaning for you.
Oh, so
Yeah.
much. Yeah, yeah. No, you're totally right on. I mean, yeah, for me, I always felt, that everybody who's working for our company has the same value for the company. I was not thinking in terms. I knew how to honor ranks. I knew how to honor, this is a person above me. So if I want to make a decision, then I include them in the decision-making process. I knew how to honor the lines, but I highly believe that every person has the same value, and that the people who are actually on the floor and to get the job done, this is where the sources of information and motivation, and where we need to, see validation. We need to let them know that they're doing something really important. So I was totally, my model of thinking was seed model. It
Right.
was, kind of more the idea of a circle rather than of different levels.
Mm-hmm.
I do find levels practical if you need to make a decision,
Right.
but I like to include all the voices that need to be heard, in a company.
Yeah.
And my sense of leadership style was always, I want to create a space where people can really grow into their best potential. So my job is to create safety, to create trust, and that's something that needs to be built over time. That really takes a lot of time and a lot of little details, that how you grow a relationship with little by little by little. It's not the big things. It's not the 100 roses at one event, but it's more, here's a little note, here's a little feedback. Oh, I remember your birthday. I do remember it
Right.
again. And oh, I know that you have been in a hospital. How have you been? How are you doing now?
Yeah.
How do you feel? Let's check in. So it's the continuation of nurturing relationships that
Mm-hmm.
was really important to me, and seeing everybody has the same value. I may not like every behavior. I may not tolerate every behavior. I may not have the time to figure out what behavior we can change and how, and but
Your initial, um, one of your initial experiences was hearing from, I think her name was Judy, about her experience with Virginia and this Mother Earth, this hug, this embrace. Um,
mm,
what what else resonated for you in terms of Virginia's work, and how did you start to then incorporate it in terms of your own personal and professional life?
yeah. Well, the next, the other seed I had was, that, one of my teachers, Dr. Gunther Schmidt, who created the hypnosystemic approach, talked about Virginia and how he met her. They actually brought the whole, systemic work to the Heidelberg, school, and they were like the first in Germany bringing all the systemic work that was coming from the United States in Germany. So it was kind of,
Is that
and, I, could just feel the kind of the sparkle and the love and the connection when Gunther was talking about, the Ericksonian approach, but also the systemic approach. So there was, I don't know, it was more on the indirect, like more, how did people, how do I saw them sparkle. I saw him very soft and just sat in such a loving, space, that I resonated with that. So that was another seed for me.
okay? So
Then my teacher,
before we skip on to that, I
Stephen
think,
Gilligan.
yeah. So I don't want to skip past that because I think it's an important point, and I think it might be worth unpacking, Eva. The sparkle, it's like, say, I'm imagining someone listening to that just being like, well, what the hell does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
But there's a sparkle, there's something you perceived that was nonverbal
Yeah,
in
totally.
how that he was speaking about. So let's try to be detectives together to understand that, because I think that's a very common experience for
Hmm.
people who have had personal contact. Now, I never met Virginia. I don't think you had a chance to meet
No,
Virginia
no,
directly,
that's
but that there's some kind of spark that is passing now through generations
yeah,
of therapists, of coaches, and things like
yeah,
this that I think is worth unpacking, because it is kind of a mystery
yeah.
why, well, one, how her work is still resonating with so many people on such a deep level, but
I
then
agree.
two, the other part of it is how, the later part of our conversation could be like, how can we share her work and share this
True.
model even more?
Yeah.
But so can just kind of unpacking that a little bit more, staying with, what was his name?
Dr. Schmidt.
Right. With him, I'm not gonna be able to repeat that name, but he what was he talking about? What do you remember him saying?
Um, I didn't hear about much about the professional connection. Was much more just the encounter of being in her presence,
Hmm.
and something that I heard not just from him but also Matthias, Inza, Stephen Gilligan. So I could just unpack this to other
So there's a
with
common
other
theme of
people too.
something to do with her
The
presence.
Absolutely. I mean, I heard Stephen Gilligan, for example, saying I guess he was presenting at an Ericksonian conference, and he was giving a demo on stage where he said, I could just feel something shifted in the room. There was this, warm, gigantic presence all of a sudden. I couldn't even see it because it was facing my back, but I knew it was Virginia entering the room. And I got nervous because I felt that she was now there and watching the demo. So there was, um, I heard repetitively from people her warmth, her way of connecting, her way of being, and her just really big presence um, that was obviously lighting up the room
Hmm. Hmm.
and leaving a sense of connection with people, beyond the time of their shared connection.
Yeah, yeah. I think
So
the yeah, it's not something
I
that
think it was
will.
more the embodied presence than before the magic. I mean, obviously there's magic on how she was, developing her approach, but before that, I think it was really her presence.
Yeah, well, I think you could analyze the way that she worked from a technical perspective, and that's
Yeah,
what the developers of NLP did. And then there's what you're talking about now, which is so hard to talk about. How
I know.
what is embodied presence? Those are words pointing at something.
Yeah.
And I think her use of sculpting, her use of her body, her use of herself was something that was quite unique. And I wonder with that, um, how that has been maybe part of your life even before you knew about Virginia Satir, and then how maybe that connection to yourself or use of your body and use of your own
Mhm.
self, how that's been for you in the work that you do.
Yeah, I think you're pointing out something really, really important. What I noticed very early on is that the use of the self is key. I realized that from the very beginning, and it's not just when we talk about Virginia, but for example, when I see Gunther Schmidt teaching and coaching or doing therapy, his use of self is key in in the space. And then he's technically, I mean, a master in what he does. But what really has the healing quality is the sense of how he holds himself in the conversation. And to me, I kind of had a hunch. There got to be something about the presence of her as a person that is so significant and so important. And to me, I feel she was embodying really her mission: peace within, peace between, and peace among. Um, so not just having these as beautiful mission words as a sign, but really, what does it mean to really feel peace within myself and peace between the two of us that allows then to radiate out peace among, and to really live that, breathe it, and walk it. And
so what does that mean to you, Eva? Peace inside, and
well, to me, it really brought me to, I really want to unpack every part of myself. I really want to look at, through every encounter I have with other people, I have a metaphor that everybody is a mirror of some aspect in me. So whoever of the universe has given me as a chance to relate, I really want to take them as really, really good and clear mirrors of, something that I feel, yes, that's me too. I'm me and you, and we're different on one level, but on a spiritual level, you're me and I am you. And if it's difficult to kind of check what is it that's making it difficult, and what is that piece that I can learn in that relationship right now, because we have this beautiful connection, and the universe gives me an opportunity to learn through you a lot about myself. So if I really want to dig into finding peace within myself, to me, the journey has become through the self-relations approach. That was one key, but also parts party ideas, that I really want to bring light to all the seemingly shadow parts, so that I can grow into every day more fullness, more connectedness in my own beingness. So I don't project things out to somebody else as much anymore, but I really kind of own it myself. So to me, it means getting to know myself, and the good and the bad and the ugly, and use the tools I learned so that myself can grow in beauty and really be nurtured in a peaceful and helpful way.
Right. Yeah, I think that's beautifully put, Eva. The combination of not just being a detective or exploring external things or external relationships, but exploring yourself, holding up that mirror, allowing people that you encounter to be a mirror, a reflective point for your own life. Virginia Satir used to say a lot, we connect through our sameness and we grow through our differences. And those areas of, what I've been thinking about, at the level of differences, it can be very painful. And I think the relationship that you described with your father, those differences were probably very conflictual and painful. And then I've been thinking a lot about this idea of forgiveness and grace, and how important it is to get to that place. I mean, even if we're not able to get there at the level of our role or relationship, maybe the differences are too great that we can't sustain a professional connection, or we can't sustain a personal relationship. That forgiveness, at least in terms of how that frees up and expands our self-understanding, our peace within our own heart, how important that is. And that's sort of a bigger topic, forgiveness. But forgiveness, of course, is, I think, very relevant to peace, and the peace that you're talking about. So.
Yeah, I mean, I believe if you want to make peace with other people, it starts with making peace with your own self. And in order to be able to do that, I have to become aware, I have to become conscious that there are parts that I have made peace with yet. I think it's also the willingness to dig in deep and to bring up, to let bubble up the parts that I may have neglected, I may have put aside, may put down to the basement, and I'm maybe sitting on them and not even realizing that those are parts I have made friends with yet. I'm really, really using the work first, I guess, to allow things to bubble up. And I believe personal relationships are the best way to allow those those triggers to happen, to bubble up. What are the parts that I am not really looking at myself yet? And
can you describe what you mean by parts?
Well, when I talk about parts, I'm always a little bit, I guess, conflicted about the term. Goodness would actually use a side. There's a side of me that, wants to look perfect and the professional self. And there's a side of me that just likes to be, at ease and relax and just enjoy myself. So when I talk about that, I talk about different aspects in me. And I mean, I could bring it to core feelings, anger, fear, happiness, or joy. And what's the fourth one? What's the fourth category? Sadness. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm familiar
like
with that.
primary
Okay,
emotions.
I'm like, what is sadness again?
Yeah.
I could bring it all down to core feelings.
Right.
Those are aspects, and then they can have many faces, right? Happiness can look, many different ways. My fear can look many different ways, and then that becomes characteristics that become resources. So for me, parts are the many aspects, the many energies that we feel inside of ourselves, and that they take on different embodied versions of ourselves. So could be ego states, that could be another way of putting it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
What was the part, if you don't mind going, kind of using yourself as an example, can you, like in that period of crisis or of figuring out where you fit in the company or how it wasn't working, what was the part that you were grappling with at that point in your life? Maybe that as an example that might better explain parts.
So what happened was there was a part of me that was professional and on the far. So I was the HR director. I was the marketing director for a company, and so I was performing towards our clients, and in our client projects, I was performing there, and I was also performing in the interaction with most of the employees that I engaged with. Then I was very much in connection, even though this was happening in the forefront, but inside I was very much in connection. There is a part of me that feels absolutely empty and sad.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even totally name it.
Right.
So
the professional role was what was conscious. The sadness, what was in the shadows, was more in the unconscious.
More in the shadows. It was also much more on the body level. It was so big. It was such an intense feeling that I was not even able to put it in language at the very beginning. It was just a lot of feelings, a lot of physical connections.
Right.
But I think it was for a long time in connection with a professional self that I put to the outside, and I put my professional head on. And then on the inside, there was a lot of mixed feelings that I couldn't totally fully make sense at the time.
Mm-hmm. So with the benefit of hindsight, what do you think the yearning was that was connected to that sadness?
To be understood.
Okay.
Big yearning was about having a voice and to be really fully understood in my deepest sense of self.
Okay. Like to be seen and understood.
And it was even more so about having a space. I felt like I did not really claim and really have a space.
Mm-hmm.
To have a space.
Right. It sounds like that sadness was very much connected to yourself, and it was a loyalty of, I need a space for myself, my capital S self, to emerge and to express itself into the world.
Very much. I could, we could also think about. I learned about a self model that's a triangle idea where you have the perfect self. I learned through Ben and Jock, who are the founders of the Haven Institute in Canada, about this model, which I really like. And so they say there's a perfect self where I project out, this is who I want to become, and this is you know. Then there's the authentic self, and then there's your actual self, or it could be your performance self. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I take my own situation, I had designed this perfect self that was obviously pretty far away from my authentic self. And then my actual self was running to chase this perfect self and walking, and both of them were kind of walking away from the authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
As I found myself very, very far away from my authentic self, that was
Yeah.
the decision point where I said, I need to find myself someplace else. I needed to lose myself in order to find myself.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's from within your own life experience and what you've learned, do you think there's any way around that? Like that tension that we feel when we move away from the self, that actually becomes like an energy that snaps us forward maybe to then pursue the
yeah.
expression and the connection to the authentic self.
Yeah. I would say this is a pretty universal way
Yeah.
of growing and of understanding and differentiating between the meeting other people's expectation and the moving towards the perfect self. And does that match the authentic self, or does it go
Yeah.
away from it? I think we need to lose. We need to kind of fall into a crisis in order to come back on track and align ourselves.
Yeah.
To me, it's part of maturity. It's part of yeah, the differentiation between other people's dreams and your own dreams, and
Hmm.
and the outside and the inside, and bringing the two of them together. I don't think you it's either or. To me, it's more, there is a way of how can you harmonize it in the best meta balance that may not be, all fully one, but there may be a meta balance,
Yeah. Yeah.
bringing the two together. And to me, it does need the falling out of the paradise in order
R-
to really re-navigate yourself with a more inside out reference experience to what it means to go back to paradise.
Yeah. Yeah. What I like about this is it really helps normalize the the universal nature of negative experience, of negative
Oh,
emotions, right? It just kind of makes it so okay. And
I
hopefully, I think at this moment in time, uh, because we're not in the midst of chaos, we don't have to be bitter and resentful about the negative, painful suffering of life. But I think yeah, it's much harder when you're in it. But I
yeah,
think to have that attitude, and I think as guides or as in your case with coaching, in my
yeah,
case with therapy or whatever kind of process we're engaged in, it's having a faith that the
yeah.
overall archetypal map
Oh,
or the process is, like I think about childbirth. It's like
yes,
that you're going to such a place of unknown, and
yes,
maybe the birth of the self is metaphorically similar to that. It's like it's
yes,
emerging, but sometimes you have to go into these really you have to go into these dark places in order to emerge, and you're that friction with life and that tension between
yes,
what is not authentic with what is, that's
yes.
where that that's the growth of it, that's the growth of yourself.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I mean, I would definitely echo back and say yes. I actually call those kind of the kisses of awakening. It's the
That's nice.
it's the universe saying, "Hey, we have a really big plan for you. We're gonna kiss you awake, and just let you know something you're doing here is not working quite
Mhm.
right. And what would be the best language that is transmitting this really important message so that you get it, you understand it. I know from me, I have a physical language. So when the universe needs to kiss me awake, I go through the body.
Right.
This is my strongest, weakness, and also my strongest resource is both. Like,
Right.
this is where I draw my resources. But when the shit hits the fan, I really get into bad physical crisis. So it really
Hmm.
becomes painful. So
Right.
it's both for me. It's my greatest resource, but it's also my greatest area of pain that has been a lifelong, painful
Yeah.
discovery. But this is the way how I get kissed awake. And so for me, it's kind of a kiss awake.
I love that phrase, kissed away. And it reminds me of that image that you've implanted in my head of Virginia Satir giving your friend that big hug. Because I think a lot of her message was, in order to move through that hero's journey, you need a lot of support. You need a lot
Oh,
of
yeah,
nurturing.
you do.
And her emphasis on the relationship, bared itself out decades later in research that emphasized that the therapeutic relationship is the most essential
Yes.
ingredient to healing and with growth. So,
Yeah.
um, to
I
have
agree. You just
spaces like
love.
that.
I actually usually introduce the idea of a circle of love or circle of support, that are not just people that you think about that have inspired you, but really physical people that are there that can give you a hand, that are close by, that can hold you in the moments where you really don't
Mm,
feel good about yourself, and where you just kind of need to have a bad hair day and it's still okay.
right.
I think I like both. I like to have my mentors, my teachers, my awakeners, my inspirations, but they may sometimes be very far away. But then you need your community of physical people close by around you that can really give you a hand and say, it's okay, I've been through this in my own way. I
Hmm.
don't know what specifically you're experiencing, what specifically your story is, but the general hurt you're going through. I have had those challenges myself, and I'm
Right.
here to hold a space for you. I'm here to hug you.
Yeah.
Hugging is the best medicine at those points, anyways.
Yeah. I think while we can't avoid those kisses from the universe, I think is if we get into um, a place where we're more and more willing to trust
Yeah,
that process and to trust um, such painful experiences as actually being some kind of a gift from the universe, say,
yeah,
then then I think that cycle, maybe it shortens or maybe not, but it at least our attitude throughout the painful experiences is different, and I think that gives a greater resilience to
absolutely.
to really get the most out of an experience and get the most out of life.
Absolutely. I have to admit, I was in the peak of my pain experience, where then later on I learned about the change process from Virginia Satir, and then hearing, oh, chaos is part of the, change and growth process.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I learned about the format of the hero's journey, where you're crossing a threshold, you're going into the unknown, and you're meeting the demons, and that's part
Hmm.
of the journey. But the demons are also, at a similar time, you also find your mentors, people, teachers, people that support you and that help you to really transform into some new resources that are growing into you becoming your own. I got all these understandings after I was through the biggest dip of my hero's journey, through the valley.
Right.
Um, and then I thought, oh my God, I wish somebody had told me this before. Then, in the middle of it, this would have been a nice piece of
Y-
information.
Yeah, yeah.
I
It's like I wish someone gave me a map before I went on this journey.
Exactly. How about that, Matt? But you go through the big one, and that was probably one of the really, really big crisis points in my life. But the next one is just around the corner once you successfully
Yeah.
took a nice picture on the status quo that's new, and you're like, oh, okay, that's better now. I usually say to my clients, turn around, look at the journey, honor the journey, and say, wow, that was amazing. Take a nice picture so you enjoy the view. Because once you continue, then probably the next new element comes and the next crisis point appears.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, I would say this was a gift for me that allowed me to really dig in and say, who do I want to become, and what is the gift that I really want to share, and how can I heal my wound so that my wound can be in service of the gift. and really become an authentic messenger for this work. Because I believe if you haven't been wounded, you can't be a really authentic and good messenger for the work if you want to help people move through really, really difficult times.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
So I'm grateful for my wounds. I'm grateful for having, the Buddhists say your heart is meant to break open. So I guess my heart was broken, and I broke open to take the learnings and be in service for others too.
So I guess I'm still curious in terms of the question of what impact Virginia Satir has had on your life,
Yeah,
personally and professionally. So maybe we could focus on that now.
sure. What happened for me, I was the first time I came to a Satir community connection was
Yeah.
one of the annual meetings, and Sharon Loeschen was the person greeting me at the door, and that was the very first meeting I went to. Sharon hugged me, and I felt like I was hugging Virginia Satir. I swear to God, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I can tell it's not Virginia, and I know it's not her, but somehow I feel Sharon and Virginia are hugging me together. This was kind of the first body sensation that I had. I entered the meeting, and I just loved the love, the nurturing, and the connection that was just filled in the room. And I actually took a friend of me with me, and I said, I'm going to this meeting. I'm really nervous. This is a new community. I don't know these people. Can you come with me? And people were so curious about our friendship and our connection that we got so much curiosity. There's so much openness. I felt connected and being engaged with people there throughout the whole time.
How did you feel in your body? What do you remember happening inside of you physiologically when you're having this
I
connection?
felt tingly. I felt warm. I felt vibrant and alive. I felt happy. I felt light. I really felt light. It wasn't a professional meeting. I felt like I could strip away my mask and I could just be myself in it.
Yeah.
And it was just friends meeting friends and having, some shared experiences. This is when I did the enriching program.
Right.
The whole thing was conducted through the enriching program, and so it was actually guided by all these different steps. But it didn't feel like I was doing a workshop. It was much more feeling like here's a lovely community meeting, and I just feel warm and fuzzy and
Yeah.
light and
I'm
bubble.
remembering what you said earlier, Eva, when it was when you were feeling in that place of crisis, that the sadness and that the yearning was for to be understood and seen. And I can't help but think of that moment. And then you're in this moment, and there's a space of love and connection.
Yeah.
Did that yearning come up in that moment? And like, was that something that was nurtured? That deep sort of connection of a space for the self.
Not conscious. I can't
Yeah.
say it was any conscious, but I just knew in my whole body that this is a good space to be in, and I would not want to do anything else right now in this moment. This was exactly where I was
Yeah.
supposed to be, and exactly something to continue to go to
Yeah.
in different times. And
So you felt congruent in that moment,
yeah,
like
I felt
your inside and your
absolutely.
outside matched.
I was a match. This was the right space. These were the right people. This was the right thing for me to do. I'm in the right space. And I felt reconnected to my intuition, my inner wisdom voice. I felt like your voice took you there. You were
Yeah.
very congruent and saying, hey, I heard you have an annual meeting. Can I come? And I think they were fully booked or something, but there was a way for me to talk me into it. So there was a way.
Right.
I wanted to be there. I made sure I was there, and things were just falling into place. And then I
Right.
sat there and I said, now I know why, because my voice was taking me there, and it totally makes sense.
Could you describe because you shared this with me before, when you first walked into a room, your initial impressions, and you talked about the wisdom and sort of the unassummingness of this group of
Yeah.
people? Yeah.
Yeah, it was really funny. It was like, okay, I'm here at the Satir meeting, and I felt like, there was a lot of these beautiful women that were like knitting or crocheting or doing different
Yeah.
handcrafts things, and then so this, I don't know, it was almost like a grandmother's mother's type of meeting. I mean, there were men there too. It was a lot of women, but mainly women, but also mixed. I was also
Hmm.
men. But just the whole energy was very motherly, very nurturing, and very oh, let's share coffee together or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I was at awe about the warmth in the words, but also the wisdom that came from each person, sharing different experiences. So I was
Hmm.
very impressed
Yeah.
by I guess, the professionalism, the skill sets that were held and embodied, and in a way where it was, I don't need to, you know, shower you with my expertise.
Right. Right.
It was
Right.
embodied, it was held in the right moment, shared. So there's such a humbleness, um,
Mm-hmm.
with wisdom, and such a down to earth, matter of fact. I have this. I know what I know, but I don't.
Like a quiet confidence.
Yes, it was a very
Yeah.
quiet confidence, very humble authority. Um, I would, yeah, I would probably
Yeah.
put words.
The image that's coming to me is the movie Star Wars.
Yeah,
The when Luke Skywalker first meets Yoda, he goes into this like swamp, and he
yeah,
goes to this random place, and there's this little green creature who's like, I don't know, 500 years old,
right.
and there's a humbleness, a meekness to his appearance, but
Yes.
there's a tremendous amount of strength and wisdom, and that's how I experience a lot of the people like Sharon
Oh,
Loeschen and a lot of people in this community from the Satir world where there's this like untapped source of mm, wisdom of elders
yeah, yeah,
of a generation that was connected to Virginia Satir that I'm very passionate about connecting to, and then also trying to bridge that to the larger world, the expanse of that. So yeah,
yeah. I agree with you. I really felt like, oh my God, there's so much knowledge. There's so
yeah,
much experience, expertise, and so much wisdom that comes from the lived, embodied wisdom, but also then from the knowledge, from the learning, from the teaching, and really digging into the details, and having done the homework for many, many years and really understood the concepts, and held in a very humble and very not showing off at all.
hmm,
Just a because I studied marketing way back when, and so people I encounter a lot of times were really like, oh, this is me, look at this, and this is what I accomplished, and this is
yeah,
what I felt. So, but the way they embodied it was so much more. There's so much love for Virginia, and her work, and that she really had figured it out. I mean, it's such a holistic, for me, figured out systemic approach that really gives you simple, understandable tools to make sense of the complexity of you as a human being
mm,
in the
hmm,
most simple, understandable way. I mean, that's in itself is crazy magic to me. If
yeah,
you put into simple words and simple tools and models something that seems to be undescribable,
yeah,
uh, but it's possible.
yeah.
And yeah, and I found all the people that I encountered in the network really were able to grab that and really understand it, and hold that on knowledge and wisdom in themselves.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we can talk about uh, Virginia's Satir's work in the context of modern psychotherapy or other models of practice, what, if anything, she still has to offer. And obviously, as people that are studying her work to this day, we're biased sample. But could you speak to that? Like what resonates for you still? You've been studying Virginia's work for I don't know how many years now, but
Mm, since
what is unique? What
2005.
is 25? Yeah,
Yeah.
what's unique about it, and um, what, for people listening that are curious, what benefit to their lives would they have of studying Virginia's work that is distinct from other things that are out there?
Well, I feel, I mean, it all starts with humanistic approach, right? I think the core is every person is beautiful and magical and good in its core, and this is where we begin. And then a lot of the things that we see in action are learned behaviors. And to me, Virginia really has figured out in her model to conceptualize and to describe how we become who we have become today, and
Right.
how we put things in action, how that's related to learn. Um, a lot of times learned in our first faculty of learning, which is the original triad, MAPA and child, and
Right.
by modeling them and taking on and meaning making out of a very distorted perspective. I think that was, to me, genius, to understand that she had this idea that out of this very distorted perspective, me little and looking up to these people, most of the things that are um, having meaning or are set in beliefs and are really active in us today are coming from the times where things were out of proportion, and creating a tool like the family reconstruction where you can update old pictures into some new pictures. Um,
Can I stick with your point about things being out of proportion? Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think that you're making an important point there. When you pick up things and learn things as a kid, you take it, and what did you mean by out of proportion?
what I mean is that it's just a simple physical fact. When I am little and big people are in charge of me, grown-ups,
Yeah.
my perspective is looking up, um, through many moments, through many years. And so every facial expression is out of perspective. I'm looking up, so your face may look very angry,
Right.
but just having a straight face, and you're very focused and concentrated, or maybe you're meditating or something like that.
Right.
So, and when we're changing, I mean, I'm always thinking about those, funny mirrors.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the
Distorted it reflection.
so
Yeah.
when we grow up, we're actually looking in funny mirrors. Maybe that's why we like the fun houses so much. I have no idea. Maybe there's an intuitive self that says, "Oh my God, okay, let's look at those mirrors again." But it feels like we're looking into these funny house mirrors where everything becomes, big, because I look up, and so facial expressions are different than what they really mean. I just see a limited piece of the picture because, when
Mhm.
I'm small, I can't change positions the whole time.
Yeah. One of the things that she would do was she would put kids up on chairs, or
Right.
if it just so happened that the wife was shorter than the husband, she would put them up on a stool so they could see eye to eye. And I
Yes,
think it illustrates, or it's an example of where there's less distortion because you're seeing at the eye to eye level.
absolutely.
And I think this embodied, the physical embodiment or the awareness of bodies in her practice was something very unique, because she would go out of her way to make sure that she was allowing the people that she was working with to experience what it means to be equal of value.
Yes.
And and then I think, in connection to other models, I think one of the limitations is, the thing that you're describing of, there's something to do with her presence. There's something that she would do in how she would make connection with you through her eyes or through a hug,
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes with other models, there's such an emphasis on either technique or languaging things
Yeah.
that there's not as much an emphasis on the body. There's
Yeah.
not as much emphasis on training awareness of your own body.
Yeah.
That these are things, touch, connection to your own physiology,
Right.
that is, I don't think is emphasized enough in other models and in training. And I think this kind of thing needs to be highlighted, which is what is unique about Virginia's work.
Absolutely.
That the use of self, the awareness of your own use of your senses or your own inner uh, physiological sensations.
Yeah.
So,
I agree with you. I think it's very unique that she was, creating these body pictures with people. You're putting them in
yeah,
communication stances in order to have a conversation about what's happening on the inside. How do you feel? What's happening
mm,
when you're in this picture, to get the information quickly to the table of what was not talked about
right,
in a family. And I find that absolutely brilliant. And it's also, I mean, this body holds so much history. This body holds so much wisdom and 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 story. Like my whole culture runs through my body. It's
mm-hmm,
not just my body, but there's so much information from generations before, and my culture, my history that moves through this. And the beautiful thing about the body is now. The mind can go many places. The mind can go to the future, it can go to the past, and
right,
can be very distracting. But if I have a full body connection in the space, then I tap into resources that are now. And it's to me such a quick way of activating information, but also activating resources. And it's a big attractor for me to change pattern really quickly. I mean, I in my practice use the body as one of the main tools for interventions,
mm-hmm,
because I'm very aware of that. I'm very physical, as I told you. Gifts and pain move through my body. So I know how to dissociate from my body. I know that really well. But I also know what it means to return home to
right,
a beautiful instrument that holds so much
mm-hmm,
wisdom and the language before language, because a lot of the things that are coded in us don't have words yet. So in order to ripen the right proper words, to name it and claim it for the social community in the right way, sometimes I may need to have it move through my body a little bit until the words that are really proper come to me.
right, yeah. So that might be like a movement practice or dance or some other kind of practices of the body that you do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. So
yeah,
yeah, I would agree that it's such a pioneer idea to be so physical, to use the body so intensely in Virginia's practice. I think too her understanding that phenomena are part of a systemic conversation. That it's a problem is the symptom is not only in me. I may be carrying a symptom. I may be the identified patient, but holding this has a lot to do maybe with integrity and loyalty issues, and many interactions between significant others that are of importance of me.
yeah, yeah.
So not
Th-
treating a symptom and trying to get the cause, but really finding the larger space and where this is taking place
Yeah,
is
yeah.
genius to me.
I think in terms of the family therapy concept of symptoms happening within symptoms, oftentimes playing a balancing or a homeostasis role in within the family context is not emphasized enough. And because the mechanical model would go after the symptom and say, how can we reduce the symptom as the source?
Yes.
If we can reduce the symptom, then we've dealt with the issue, say. But I think taking the broader view of how is that physical symptom like, for example, when you talked about the different physical manifestations, it was you in relationship to your life, in relationship to your father, in relationship to the business.
Right.
All of these various levels of analysis were going on. But if you just focused on, okay, what medication to take,
Yeah.
That's
How do
part of
we
that.
serve?
That's that's part of it, but maybe but it's not the whole, and to account for the different levels is important.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so I wanted to ask you maybe one last question around your own personal mission as it relates to and work related to the future direction of Virginia Satir's work, what your hope is, um, what you're doing as it relates to that hope. Could you speak to that?
Hmm. Well, first of all, I believe that we're social creatures, we're social beings, so we need each other in moving forward. And a lot of the mess has created in our social interactions. So I believe strongly that a very systemic relationship oriented approach is, especially in the new, digitalization, we're looking at phones all the time. So for me, coming back to the juice of relationship and to how the problems in relationships get created and have that as a focus of attention is to me key. I'm really
Mm,
happy to know that in modern neuroscience, like for example, from Daniel Siegel, it's emphasized now that when we talk about a mind, that we talk about the brain, the embodied mind, and relationship as the areas to
right.
focus attention. So neuroscience today, to me, is supporting the relationship focus, and so the it gives me hope that Virginia's approach, that Virginia's wisdom, which to me was very pioneer. It may have been there a little bit too early. I think she was very much before her time. But there's so much new areas that are coming and giving more, data and understanding that hopefully we can bring a new, fresh awareness to the beauty and the possibility to really live the freedoms, not just talk about the five freedoms, but really live them in your
Yeah.
daily
Yeah.
life and in your relationships. To me, my hope is I want to help the business world, the personal world, the different people that I encounter in my professional and personal life to help them really live the five freedoms, not to put it on a poster on the wall and love them, but really live them and
Can you
breathe.
say what the five freedoms are? Would you go
The
through them?
five freedoms are to be free to see and hear what's going on, to really feel what you feel in a moment in time, to feel really free to speak about what you see, hear, and feel, to share it,
Yeah.
the freedom to ask for what you want and for what you need, and the freedom to take risk in your own behalf, to really step into your own new territory
Right.
if you're calling and rock the boat and not be safe and secure.
Yeah.
So basically, to use your senses and use them all, to use your feelings to really share your wisdom, to bring it in connection and
Hmm.
to allow to ask that you have wants and needs and you can ask them in
Yeah.
and take risk. And
Yeah.
I feel my mission is to help people to do that in a peaceful way so that we do it in a systemic way where I honor somebody else has the same freedom. So we need to find a way how we can balance that in a systemic way.
Mm,
That's not me, my freedom, but what's the systemic living the
right.
freedoms in a systemic, healthy way as a community, as a family, and and really create awareness around the depth of the work and how helpful it is in everyday activities in our core
Yeah.
relationships and relationship to ourselves.
Yeah. When you were talking about Daniel Siegel's work and his inclusion of relationships as being part of it, this podcast is called the Self Connection Podcast, and the word connection is so important because those five freedoms are intentions, energies, actions, resources that we can put
Yeah.
inside in our relationship with ourselves. So to the freedom to feel, okay, what is going on inside of me? the
Right.
freedom then to put that out in the space between you and I, to speak that out into the space.
Yes.
And so it's the kind of energies or intentions and actions that have implications for the space within and the space between
Yes.
that I think sometimes when we overemphasize the form of things of, what should have happened
Right.
or what happened in, the events that have happened in the past
Right.
or the form of a particular behavior, when we overemphasize, let's say, defiant behavior from a child, when it's so much on a particular form, I think we forget that we're we're alive, so that we're an ongoing process.
Yes.
We're not a specific event. We're not fixed.
Oh, yes.
And I was thinking about this in terms of every day I look at my son, who's only 2.5, and he looks different every day. And
Right.
then I realized, I think probably I look different every day, and some, like a few more wrinkles, a few more gray hairs,
Right.
a few
Right.
more pounds. And so
Yeah.
it just validates for me that I'm dying and that I'm an ongoing process, right? There's life kind of going through, um, and I think that's what uh, Virginia has helped me understand. And I think through our conversation, I'm
Yes.
really feeling that there's a there's a there's a we're processes, we're not objects, we're not
Oh,
things.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally think about the house and about the work in progress. Yeah, there's a continuation. It's a continuation of unfolding, of understanding, of creating more awareness, of being more conscious. I hope that till the day I die, I unpack more and more um, things about myself. So I hope my wisdom comes from staying continuously curious about myself and surprising myself about myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that's where wisdom comes in when you really are surprised about yourself, like, oh my God, there's a new element, there's something that I haven't really known about myself, but
Mm.
allow, no matter what color that has, um, to really unpack it and unfold it and say, okay, that's part of the conversation too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same true for everybody else I encounter, so that we become, bigger over time. And
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Um, so why don't I usually like to ask people that I'm speaking to if we can take a moment to just kind of ground in our bodies and to get a sense of how this conversation has been, because we've been talking for some time now,
Wow.
and to
Yes.
just feel what it's like to be slowing down a little bit, to let go of words for a moment, and to just share with each other what's feeling alive in each of us, whether it's a feeling or an image or a physical sensation. So yeah, let's both take a moment to do that. And um, so do you have something that you'd like to share?
Well, I feel a lot of gratitude for you for opening this conversation. And I feel so much gratitude for Virginia,
Hmm. Hmm.
courageous path that she went. She was truly a leader. And it allowed me to feel gratitude for my own journey.
Yeah. Like,
So I wanted to say thank you for allowing me to
thank
feel
you.
gratitude for that.
Yeah. I'm I'm feeling like a lot of like vibration in my body, and I don't know if it's because of the latte I had a moment ago, but I think it was long enough ago that I can attribute it to um, this unpacking and exploration with you. And what I want to appreciate in you is your curiosity, your courage to go into those dark places and to cultivate the wisdom that you've developed to explore
Hmm.
people and to learn and to be humbled to learn from so many different people. You've been on an adventure and continue to be on an adventure, and I'm so appreciative that our paths have crossed because I think that there's probably lots of places for us to grow together and to
Yeah.
share together. So I want to thank you for taking the time,
Yeah.
and So why don't we say goodbye to everyone that on the interwebs. So that's it
Yeah,
for today,
great.
and we'll see everyone next time. So